Netflix as a streaming entity has suffered a major blow. It lost 200,000 subscribers and it's projected to lose another 2 million subscribers. Now, this sent its stock tanking. And as per the norm, the usual, and as heavily predictably, a lot of mainstream media outlets are now running cope. And that's all it can be described as. What's the downfall? Why is it this? Why is it that? Oh, it's definitely linked to this. And little has anyone mentioned just the firm, reasonable statement: capitalism. Netflix is a paid-for service. People have chosen to tune out of it because capitalism. They are not providing what their consumers want. And there's been a long-running theme of Netflix providing what some people call agenda-driven content. Woke content would be another terminology. Just things with a certain bias. You know what you're getting yourself in for when you watch a certain Netflix show. They hit certain cues. They have certain check marks against their name. And it's all a bit samely. In the striving nature to acquire diverse content, if everything becomes uniform because it all must conform to the same diversity, are we truly getting diverse content? The answer is no. So I thought we would take a look today at a very interesting COPE article on The Hollywood Reporter. And it's staggering where they run their blame to one content decider, to this one, to the head, to this, to that. And they even cite Dave Chappelle causing strife and unease inside Netflix of all of about 10 employees. It's staggering how much cope they run. Again, bear in mind this is a paid for service. You don't have to have it. And the thing is, loads of people are tuning out as a result of the fact that they just don't provide anything worthwhile these days. In some people's eyes, of course. So let's take a look, ladies and gents, and if you enjoy this video and obviously this sort of opening monologue, I guess you could call it, hit subscribe, give the video a like, and please do share it. Stay around for more like this, as well as movie news and movie reviews. Let's take a look. This is a staggering piece. It truly is. It's very, very funny. I saw this and I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Netflix's big wake-up call, the power clash behind the crash. That's right. You kind of know what you're getting yourself in for when this is their opening statement. As rivals toggle between schadenfreude and fear, top creators and insiders are increasingly becoming vocal about what's gone wrong with the streaming giant's culture. I would hazard a guess the creators and the insiders, those with a certain bias because they've been hired by Netflix, won't quite reveal what I think we all know has been the downfall of Netflix. Just as a quick note, they don't reveal that. Now they dive in here and talk about Schadenfreude and talking about rivals. So the rivals, a top executive at one of Netflix's legacy studio rivals. The news has dinged valuations and bad for business, but it sure effing feels good. This executive rattles off a brief history of Netflix in Hollywood, including the A word that arises in almost every conversation about the streamer. The entire town's rooting against them. It's not just the arrogance of announcing that you're the leaders, not respecting executive contracts and poaching everybody and the way they carry themselves. There was a feeling of anger and then despair. Are our businesses over? This is sort of streaming versus studio theatres, as it were. And we know that streaming cannot possibly replace theatres because they can never recoup the level of investment. Now, those studios get to feel a little sexy again, as Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav made clear in April 26 earnings call when he noted that he heads a far more balanced and competitive company. Says a key executive at a big media company, cable networks may be on the decline, but they still generate a lot of revenue. Maybe try keeping the lights on. Maybe don't kill theatrical so fast. You can't kill theatrical. HBO has realised that. Warner Brothers has realised that. While Netflix's competitors still have room to grow, and Disney in particular is committed to growing a lot, agents and creators believe they are seeing the end of the spending spree that has lined many pockets in recent years. You have to really read between the lines on this entire situation. They start talking about the spending spree, and then they start trying to run blame between certain individuals. So a top executive at a legacy company that's poured resources into streaming suggests that maybe so we'd all be insane not to give the spend a hard look, he says, adding, agents have flipped out more than anybody. They're taking it hard. Oh no. So whether Netflix's rough ride is truly a measure of the limits of subscriber growth, it's not clear. No, it absolutely would not be the limits of subscriber growth when they've lost subscribers. Whatever Wall Street thinks, at a time of war in Europe and rising inflation, it may be a little too soon to write an obituary. Netflix has gotten itself out of tight spots before. Now this is, the Hollywood Reporter Netflix filings. So for Q1, quarter one of 2022, they were expected to grow by 2.5 million subscribers, and they lost 200,000. It's the first loss in a long time. That's why it caused such a massive stir. But they've also predicted now in the second quarter of 2022 to lose about 2 million as well. Now they say back to the drama, and this is where the cope starts running. Several important Netflix creators voice a very consistent theory about what's gone wrong with the streamers' culture. But that is the issue. It is actually the streamers' culture in itself that's the problem. It's the culture at play with YouTube. And when we talk about culture, yes, unfortunately we do have to discuss some form of political bias in this discussion when you're dealing with a consumer market and a capitalist structure. Because if you have a bias and it is universally one way, generally speaking, you are distancing yourself from a large portion of the potential customer base. And as I said at the start, in our sort of striving nature to acquire a complete diverse cast in absolutely every show, we don't have any diversity anymore among programming. You know what you're getting yourself in for in every single program. There will be a gay, lesbian and bisexual character. There will be a black character. There will be a white character. There will be a strong woman character. Every single program in and unto itself has these same subsets within them. That's not diversity. If every single program is exactly the same. Now, they even fell foul of that with respect to a Viking series where they had a black Viking. And again, loads of people, sang its praises. Sure. But what if you just wanted to watch some Vikings run around? That would have been diversity. And then tell a story about African myth and legend, and have as many black people in it as you want. There you go, you have diversity amongst programming. It's an interesting concept, and I'm sure there'll be people amongst you watching now that will think I'm a bigot just for outlining that. No, that's true diversity. If everything looks the same, that's not diversity. You can have diverse array of individuals within a program, but if all programs have exactly the same thing, then there's no diversity amongst programming. And again, it's lazy, you know what you're getting yourself in for, and you can predict it. And it's boring. And when people pay for this, they tune out, as evidenced by Netflix's loss of subscribers. But the cope runs further. They see a link between Netflix's problems and the 2020 fall of Cindy Holland, who played a key role in launching the service's originals, brilliantly and often expensively. House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, Stranger Things, among others. These sources say Holland was one who nurtured strong relationships with talent and took time to offer thoughtful development notes while still making people feel safe and supported in pursuing their passion projects. Important multi-hyphenates who work or have worked with Netflix say it was Holland rather than Ted Sarandos, then Chief Content Officer, who gave Netflix its profile as a home to buzzy quality shows. It was also Holland who warned Sarandos, to no avail, that continuing to order specials from one of his comedy heroes, Dave Chappelle, would lead to internal strife and bad press. The internal strife was by all of about 10 individuals. You cannot kowtow to that mob. That is lunacy. And also they're highly rated, specials. And the bad press comes from, again, a certain subset of biases. So I don't think that that's something which you can really you can really sort of equate as a downfall. Now, they say here that the service was built on the back of Cindy Holland's taste. But then we know that there's an issue there, don't we? If the entire service and everyone starts bowing down to the Cindy Holland and it's built on her taste, then we have problems. I could give you a list of names of people who would lie down on railroad tracks for her. Ted is a fan of content, not a picker. He's a cheerleader, and a good cheerleader to a degree. According to a former insider, Netflix knew years ago that it would have to increase its volume of original shows substantially year over year to compete. The service could foresee the time when popular shows on the service, like Friends and The Office, would be reclaimed by the studios that made them as they launched their own streaming services. And for a time, as Netflix ratcheted up its originals, it seemed like an unstoppable force, growing its subscriber base even as some questioned the underlying economics of its business. But a former insider says Sarandis' volume strategy began to prove destructive to the culture and the quality of the service's offerings. Ted is great at managing growth, but the company hit a phase where they needed to manage differently. This person says, whether Holland's spendy approach itself would have proved sustainable is a question, but several creators believe Netflix lost much of its early cachet by over-rotating to less expensive, less curated, and less compelling, or the company might say broader, fare that simultaneously overwhelmed and underwhelmed some subscribers. Now they say this, 2016, the arrival of former CBS and Universal Television executive Bela Barjara as the head of unscripted and international content represented a huge turning point. According to multiple sources, by then Holland was to oversee 80 shows on the service, while Bajaria was responsible for 60. Who can make 140 shows a year? Asked one creative. That's insane. That's when the culture of fear took over. Holland declined to comment. The demand for ever more volume did not abate. Bajaria, who also had responsibility for licensing TV and film content from major US studios, quickly moved into Holland's scripted television domain, and in 2017 she gave a 13-episode order to Insatiable, a dark hour-long comedy pilot that had been rejected by the CW. I mean, ladies and gents, if it's been rejected by the CW, it's probably not going to be that fantastic, because the CW is trash. Holland's team had passed on it. One prominent Netflix supplier calls Bajaria's decision the beginning of the Walmartization of the streamer. The series also attracted negative press for fat shaming, among other sins. Again, it's not the bad press, it's not fat shaming that's the problem. It's... I don't know what to tell you. It's called Insatiable Gate within the halls of Netflix. It gave the power of green light to several people. It caused absolute demoralization and chaos. Everybody thought it was a terrible thing Ted did, allowing one team to green light something that another team had passed on. It sent a message to Ted because it did okay numbers. Ted wanted to increase content by a huge amount. Started to look to Bela as what the company should be. Cindy kept saying we should still be betting on high-end creators and making some cheaper things too. Which is fair. That's actually completely fair. And then we move further down, right? So, we start talking about we start talking about the capitalist nature of what the service is. And it is, you pay for it. If it provides what you want, it's what you want. Now we say this, so it was, hey guys, do we think this is enough? Because we are cannibalizing our own shit, says a former insider. And then there was Holland's concern about the lack of curation and quality control. An important creative talent who had successes working with Holland muses. I wonder if, say, a bonobo throwing shit at a whiteboard full of titles as a method of deciding what projects to make would have more or less success than all of these other deciders who think they know what people want or don't want. But a prominent creative who was squarely on Team Holland says they pitted Bela and Cindy against each other. People would always say they didn't know who to go to pitch, and Ted loved that stupid phrase, there are multiple paths to yes. Interesting. Interesting. One of Holland's last projects for Netflix was The Queen's Gambit, an expensive period piece that sources say was mocked as Holland's folly by some in-house. According to sources, Bajaria and her staff were dismissive and even unpleasant to the team that worked on it. When the series turned into a phenomenon, Bajaria was routinely credited for it in the media. That's very interesting. So this is one of the things that Cindy and Ted disagreed on for a while. The person says she was the one person who would push back on him. So we have Holland versus Ted, and Ted allowing loads of other people to sort of go around and buy loads of bits and pieces. Sarandos being promoted to co-CEO of Netflix. Yeah, bit of a downfall there, because then the ramp up of just productional sort of decision making went further and further. Holland had been making less than 10 million a year. Stubert and Bajaria were rewarded with salaries from $16 million to $18 million. And with that kind of compensation at stake, and Netflix is notoriously fickle, anyone can get fired at any time credo, it was no surprise that both would do their best to carry out Sarandos' vision, says a source who's worked closely on the service. So it looks, I mean, they just, the whole cope here is that they just start talking about, they start talking about the culture of content, not what is within that content. But I think what's important here, and I think most people would agree, is the nature of the type of content that is being picked by those individuals. So by Bajaria, you know, they say here the rumour mill is now spinning furiously about what Netflix will do to address its issues. Which heads will roll? Is it possible Hastings will sell? Will the streamer drop its binge strategy? It wouldn't matter if the quality was there, if you knew what you were getting, you know, and it was truly diverse, and it was actually good content. I don't think the binge strategy would matter so much. I don't think the quantity would matter so much. Talking about ad-supported option work, that's not going to work. What about games? Games are not going to work. Streaming games is, no. That's a fool's end anyway. But this is a very interesting discussion. You can see here, you read between the lines and you start looking at, well, Cindy was the one who brought in House of Cards, Stranger Things, Queen's Gambit, for instance, highly rated shows, shows which were deemed to be decent. And then you look at the other individual, Bajaria. But what Hollywood Reporter is failing to note here is where those individuals lie with their own biases and what they're bringing to the table. If this is pretty much the sole individuals that are curating content for Netflix, then you've got a massive problem there. A huge problem. But this is the situation we're in. It'll be interesting to see how it moves forwards. But the cope is here. It'll always be here. But I thought this would make for an interesting video. It's an interesting discussion piece. What do you think, personally, that has led to the downfall of Netflix? Do you think I have any credit in what I've said at the start of this video? Again, people don't have to pay for the service if they don't want to. If they were if they were actually curating good content, I still think people would pay for it. But the problem is Netflix, when something is announced via Netflix, so this is being adapted via Netflix, we all know what to look for, don't we? There is a culture within the audience. As much as there's a culture within Netflix, there's a culture within the audience of knowing full well what to expect when something is announced. And actually, it's more that when you expect that, you're more pleasantly surprised when it doesn't turn out to be crap. Because the expectation is it'll have this, and it'll be garbage. And the surprising element is when it just isn't trash. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. Be keen to hear it. Take care.